everyone. Welcome to Midweek Live. Excited that you're here with us this week. I am very, very pumped about this week. I think it's going to be exciting and insightful for those of you that are with us today. I have a panel here of very accomplished women, and we are going to talk about both physical motherhood and spiritual motherhood within the church. So I'm going to say hi to my guest. My first one is Kym Senteney, and she is married to Alden and the mother of 3 grown daughters, and she works in the childhood ministry at Park Cities Baptist Church. Kym, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fine, thanks.
I'm also joined this week by Nicole Miller. She is an attorney at a local Dallas firm, and she is married to Jay Miller, our children's pastor, and she's the mother of 2 boys. Nicole, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well.
Good to have you here. And then lastly, to my left is my wife of 8 years this month, Kym Cook. She is a PhD student at Dallas Theological Seminary, and she works there as well in the Hendricks Center as the senior administrator. Kym, how are you?
Doing all right.
Good. We're all here and we're excited. So what I want us to do this evening, ladies, is for us to talk about how physical motherhood and spiritual motherhood are interconnected in some ways, and then how the church is also responsible for spiritually sort of mothering the people that come within her doors, come within her community. And so let's dive in. And I know everybody is really, really busy, so I want us to start with probably the part that hits closest to home. Is I want us to start with the physical motherhood. So all of us are really busy. All of us have a lot of things going on, especially with this sort of self-quarantine isolation thing going on. What is one thing that a busy mom or a busy dad, a busy family can do to disciple their kids simply and do it on a regular basis? Nicole, I'll start with you.
I think for us right now, especially during this season, we just don't have like a really great time to just sit down, as a whole family and spend kind of doing discipleship things. And my kids are 8 and 4, so they're also kind of varied age-wise. So one of the things that we do is what you might call situational discipling. So when something happens and they're fighting over a toy or whatever it is, we talk a lot about grace and about forgiveness and about what that means in the situation and why we do those things, because Jesus did that for us. So we kind of spend most of our time kind of trying to direct the things that are directly impacting them throughout their day and turn it back to what Scripture says about it.
That's great. And you guys just moved, didn't you?
We did. Yes.
So there's a lot less time probably than
a lot less time. Yeah.
Kym Senteney, what do you guys do as far as in your life? I know your daughters are grown, but how did you guys do the discipleship thing in your family?
Yeah, well, I really didn't have a formal plan for discipleship. And I know my girls did not want me to preach to them, so I did not do that. It was very just natural. Usually took place around the kitchen table. Oftentimes just right after school, they'd come home and we'd sit down and have a snack and we'd just talk about their day. I tried to just listen to what they had to say, about their troubles for the day, what they were worried about, what their friends, the problems with friendships and things like that. And as they would talk, I would just try to kind of lead them toward biblical principles and help them solve problems and issues with Bible stories and what would Jesus have thought of how I behaved in that way and that sort of thing.
I think it's so important to hear. I think a lot of us think discipleship is one way. It's me pouring into this person and content. But I think it's so key what you just said. Listening is a critical part of discipleship. I mean, Jesus was constantly asking, what do you want me to do for you? What do you want me to do for you? And he would present that in a listening sense. And so, Kym, I think that's really insightful to point out how critical it is to listen to your kids and then respond to that situation. I really appreciate that answer. As somebody who likes to talk, I need to hear that. Kym, what is something that you do with our girls?
So during this time, we go on walks pretty much every day because we have to get out of the house. And that's really just turned into a really special time, particularly for my 3-year-old. We have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old right now. And the 3-year-old loves to talk, and she'll just chat on those walks and just ask questions. And I don't know why, but she just seems to bring up theological questions then. And I asked Travis if she asks him about those things at other times, and she doesn't. So there's something about it. And she just, asks me random things. And so we'll end up talking about the resurrection, or we'll end up talking about sin. And, and I'm working on my PhD in systematic theology, so I'm teaching her the real fancy words for it. But I think kids bring it up a lot, those kinds of things up a lot. And you don't even have to use the fancy words, but again, like Nicole was talking about, like the situational, like as it arises, you just address it and just have that little conversation with them. And now when we're talking about, we call COVID the big sickness in our household. And so when we're talking about it, and how there are really hard things happening, and sometimes people are even dying because we've been talking about the resurrection. Now my 3-year-old is like, but it's okay, they'll come alive again. and so then we have to have some explanations there too, but it's really good. And you can tell that. One other thing that we both do actually is we're pretty consistent about reading a Bible story to her every night, with some other story at bedtime. And that's, I feel like, has been really effective in giving us fodder for those discussions. So I think part of why we have some of those discussions on the walk is because they come up in the stories, and she's kind of thinking about those stories as, just as she goes through her sweet little day. So that's something that I guess that we do together. But what do you guys, Nicole or Kym, like, how do you guys see Jay and Alden kind of taking part in the discipleship of the kiddos? Kym?
Yeah. Well, Alden, thankfully, has always been the spiritual leader of our family. And he's always served as well. We've always served together. We served in preschool early on, and then moved to high school. And then, of course, like Travis has said, we now serve in the single adult ministry. And so that was part of our lives that our daughters saw, the priority of going to church and serving every Sunday morning, and then the priority of studying that Sunday school lesson throughout the week. They saw Alden doing that as well as just studying and reading the Bible throughout the week. So that was just something that they always knew their dad did. He was a Bible teacher, and it stuck with them, and it meant a lot. Also, on that note, Alden always respected me, and still does. And he made it very clear to our girls that we were a team, and that the decisions that we made for our kids were not just his decision or my decision, but they were our decision together as their parents. And so our girls have come back to us and thanked us for that, because they realize as they get older, not everybody's parents were like that. And not that we were perfect by any means, but they saw that the love and the respect was there in our family.
So one of the things that Jay and I have done recently, or that Jay's done for our boys during this time, is he's been doing a morning devotional with the kids. And it's Louis Giglio's devotional, and it's all about how God created the world and kind of the science behind those things. And both of our boys are very into STEM activities and science and things like that, so they've really enjoyed that. But kind of piggybacking off of what Kym said earlier, Jay has always shown our boys what it means to be kind and respectful to me, and has always shown them that we're a team. So in those moments where they're back talking or being rude or anything like that, Jay has always stepped in and said, don't talk to mom that way. That's not how we treat mom. That's not how we treat women. And just being very respectful and helping us to raise our boys in a world that like Kym said, doesn't always show them the best way to be a man and to treat people the way that Christ says that we should treat them. So he's always done a really great job of doing that.
So a lot of people think that the church's job to run point on discipleship for kids, but that's not the case. It's just an over expectation. The church is not capable of doing those things. So what should we expect? What's a healthy expectation of the church when I bring my children to a new church or to a church I've been to for years?
Well, I think, first of all, the strong biblical teaching, of course, but then I think it's the long-lasting relationships that the leaders have with those children. I know that for our girls who are all grown, they're in their 20s, and so it's been a while since they've been at Park Cities because they're in their own churches now, but they still have connections to some of those really special teachers. The teachers may send them little cards or notes. I know they got several at graduation and wedding and things like that. And my girls are like, Mom, Mrs. So-and-so from 5th grade sent me a note, and she still remembers who I am and knows what's going on in my life. So that has been really exciting for my girls. So I think the relationships are super important. And then also I was going to say that one of our daughters has actually reached out to one of her high school connect group leaders and asked her to be her mentor, just simply because she respects her as a Christian woman, and they're going to begin that relationship. And it all started because that teacher in high school just really invested in her.
I want to transition a little bit here from specific people perhaps in the church, away from physical motherhood and kids, into a little bit more of the spiritual motherhood. And I know that there have been probably women in your life who have stepped in, who have mentored you and encouraged you. And Kym, I'll start with you. Who was this person, and what did they do that made such a lasting impact on you?
So the one that immediately comes to mind is a woman who was my high school English teacher. But when I was going through college, and particularly a freshman and sophomore in college, I went through a really bad bout of depression and just didn't handle the transition into college well, and was just really unhappy and disgruntled. and technically she was my high school teacher, and so like she was off duty. She had done her assignment with me, but she volunteered to have me come over to her house for coffee once a week and just kind of talk through it all. And she, just listened and counseled and kind of helped me walk through why I was so unhappy, and helped me see kind of the silver linings of what was going on. And, and I'll just never forget the way that she really just poured into me in a way that, and it meant so much to me because she didn't have to, nobody ever really has to, but in that particular instance, it was just such a clear picture of love and care for me where I was at. It had nothing to do with anything that she was getting back.
That's great. Yeah, I'm very thankful for her as well. Nicole, what about you? Who is somebody that maybe poured into you and mentored you?
Yeah, for me, it was kind of a similar situation. After we had Corbin, Jay and I were diagnosed with infertility, and we went through just a really difficult several years of understanding what that meant and trying to decide what was best for our family moving forward. And I have a good friend who is also a minister's wife, and a lot of people had opinions regarding what we should do. With when you're a woman, your decision to have kids or not to have kids, or how many kids to have, everyone has opinions about it. And my friend, I'm sure she probably had thoughts, but she never shared them. She simply walked with us and just kind of met us where we were. And each time we said, okay, I think that maybe God's calling us, to foster care. She was like, okay, great. What does that mean? And how can I help you? And what do we need to do? And so she just really walked alongside and met me in my grief and met Jay in our grief. And so I think that that's something that's difficult to find in a person who's willing just to sit with you and to grieve with you and wait until you're ready to start making plans for how to move forward.
Well, and I feel like we've kind of come back to that idea of listening yet again, this idea of so essential in every discipleship, every mentoring relationship, whether you're adult or a child being listened to is so critical, and that's something that I'm taking away just from this interaction is I need to be a better listener, to be a better discipler myself. So that's good to know. So the last question I have is probably the toughest. At least I feel that it is. How does the church, and I feel like everybody's trying to answer this question, how does the church do a better job of cultivating mentoring relationships between women, whether they're women of different generations, same generations? What can the capital C church do better? And Kym, I will start with you. You can answer this question. What's the silver bullet?
Well, I don't know if it's a silver bullet. I think that the church needs to be challenging women to think deeply about spiritual things. I don't think that means that all women should be studying theology necessarily. There's a lot of practical elements of spirituality, like the spiritual disciplines, things like that, that don't require a lot of book reading and that kind of thing. But I think sometimes, and particularly in our denomination, not our denomination really, but more in evangelicalism as a whole, women sometimes get fed easier spiritual food. And I think that there's a lot more out there that a lot of women would really love to dig into. And I think, especially if they knew it was there. And I think that's partly the church's job, is to encourage them toward those things and help them get connected with those things. And the other thing I would say is just really bringing an really challenging whatever picture it is that society or even our church ethos of what a woman should look like, what the perfect life should look like, what everything should look like, with authenticity. And I feel like maybe even Zoom is doing that naturally because people's cats are walking across the cameras, and these days maybe we're all a little bit more okay with everybody seeing our house, and those kinds of things. But I think, owning up to, massive fails in mothering rather than talking about what we're all doing really well and those kinds of things, I think is another way. The church is a place for those things to happen. And when it's authentic, you're really then cultivating true disciples and not just the cultural Christianity, the facade.
That's great. Kym, Senteney, what do you think about that? What's a way that the church can better cultivate those relationships?
Well, I was thinking about our church, Park Cities, and I think that we are really at an advantage in the fact that we have all generations, all ages at our church. So just I thought something as simple as just connecting a younger connect group to an older connect group, and the women in those get together and do several meetups, I think it would take more than once. I think it would take several times meeting together and getting to know each other. And then I think it just becomes very personal, where the women are given time to get to know each other well enough to find someone who can be a mentor for them and connects on that personal level. I think that's the hard part. It will take time, and it does become very personal.
Yeah, I know in my experience, it has been difficult to sort of force mentoring relationships on people. It is something that seems to happen best organically. It doesn't have to, but it does seem to work best that way. I would agree. Nicole, what are your thoughts on how the church can better sort of facilitate the growth and development of women within the church, particularly in the role of mentoring?
I think that oftentimes when we plan women's events, or when we kind of think about what type of event like a woman might want to attend, we tend to make it very busy. And I think that's super natural, especially for me. If I'm going to plan something, I would, pack it full of things, because I wouldn't want there to be downtime. I wouldn't want someone to be bored or not know what, we're supposed to be doing. And I think that often we kind of hide behind that busyness, and it doesn't force us to rest and force us to just have conversations and have these natural mentoring relationships that form. So for me, I know one of the things Jay and I have wanted to do in the Lake Highlands area now that we've moved is have couples over, couples from engaged couples all the way through, just to not to have a Bible study, not to have any sort of agenda or anything like that, but just to have dinner maybe, or even just like some kind of dessert, and have people over and just kind of let the kids play and check in on people. Because I feel like I think that as women, like I said, we're very busy, and when we can slow down and just spend a little bit more time not doing things, but just kind of connecting with people, then those relationships are just more likely to form.
That's outstanding. And I don't mind inviting myself to that, particularly.
You're welcome.
Yes. Particularly because you're offering dessert. So like I'm all in now. My favorite thing. So, hey, I don't know where you are in your process of discipleship, whether you're very early on or you've been a Christian for a lot of years. My hope is what you've seen out of this is the importance of having people pour into you, whether you're a kid or somebody older. We still need people to walk through this Christian life with what we've called sanctification. This is the process of becoming more like Christ. And one of the things that I love the most about Park Cities Baptist Church is the strength of the women that are there. It's a church that has strong women who are eager to serve the Lord and eager to help other people, not just women, but help other people serve the Lord. And it's a place where I feel like that's a place where women can do that. I feel like there's a lot of opportunity and options open for women at Park Cities. And so if you're looking for that, I think our church is a place for that. If you're looking for someone to disciple and mentor you, there are people there that would do that. You're welcome to contact me or look for pastors on the website and reach out to them and say, hey, I need a mentor. I need someone to walk through life with me, and we will do our best to match you up with someone and just create some opportunities for that to grow organically. But I want to thank our guests tonight. Kym Senteney, thank you so much. You're always awesome.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Nicole Miller, always a pleasure. Thank you again for being with us.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
You moved and you were here. This is great. And of course, honey, thank you so much for taking the time. So thank you for joining us this evening. We love all of you, and if there's anything we can do to help you during this time of quarantine and crisis, we want to do that. So reach out, don't be afraid to, and we will see you next week.